1 week after Keller showed him the cave, he wrote, "I went to the cave and moved the little girl." The cave wasn't much to begin with, but as he dug it out, he uncovered some very interesting artifacts. He found a bracelet in the shape of a snake that wrapped around an arm, an Indian drill, pottery, a little book with the scorpion motif stamped on the front page. You can see that up here. It was covered with a mud-like pottery that had hardened into some kind of cement. Very hard to remove. It had a ring on one side and a copper band on the other end to hold it together. Now, can you all hear me well enough still?
Yep.
Okay, good. He also found this little gold plate. And he found this bell-like object made of lead. As you can see, it's inscribed with some sort of writing that we don't know what it is. At this point, he had only dug down maybe 4 or 5 feet. He discovered several more pieces of lead, as you see here, and also objects made of wood, a metal chisel, a 28-inch stone with writing on it. And one interesting item that he found was a chunk of pine gum. He took that home and cut it open to see if there were insects inside. Pine gum, of course, is resin, as is amber, and we see, little bugs would be extracting the amber. But he said, "I didn't find any bugs. But I cut deeper into the pine gum and found another piece of rock inside. This piece didn't have the same kind of marks. I think it was a map of some kind. There was actually more to the map, several stones that fit together. He thinks he only found about 2/3 of the original map, but it did extend from Canada to Mexico and as far east as Kansas. It had this little central location on it with footprints that went out to other sites. It could be burials, repositories, campsites, whatever it was. There were supposedly 7 caves marked on the map in the Santee area, but we know that he found 2 of them. He also found a cave in the Uinta Mountains. He found a site near Spring City, one on the Sevier River, and one near Wales. One near Wales is where he found these inscribed stones. So his reading of the map rock got him within 15 or 20 feet of the target. Pretty good figuring. Now he believed that the most important site on the map was an ancient library, a very large repository of records. That site should be located on the west side of the valley at West Point. There was a symbol that he was looking for that was supposed to mark that library, but sadly he searched and searched. He took his grandson up there. They would sit for hours and watch sitting outside. He hiked all over, and he finally just said, library is not meant for me. He also believed that there had to be a very large ancient city in the area, and that the records of that people would be found in Juab and Santee Valley County. Exactly where, I don't know. That's the way he put it. So while he was digging out the upper section of the cave where the arrowheads and most artifacts were found, he discovered stairs that led down into another chamber. It was an old workroom with a furnace at one end. There were numerous records, artifacts, and tools inside. Sometimes items were stored in stone boxes. Some had CD, others in cedar bark. Some of the boxes weighed 90 pounds. He found stone forms for making plates, a hammer, and 50 little chisels to inscribe records, and copper tubes that he said were used for pencils. There was also brass, gold, and copper cups, and stone slabs so large you couldn't even lift them. He spoke of little 3-inch by 4-inch hooks of copper and gold bound for rings. He made a sketch of the cave here on the left with 2 different views. So on the top is a bird's eye view. You can see the T-shape up there. That was all unexplored. As far as we know, he never even dug that part out. So who knows what was hiding there. But the bottom of the drawing shows, the horizontal view so you can see into the cave. On the right there, Crystal Brewer, his granddaughter, very graciously allowed me to use that to show you that. I think it would be a really good. So we don't have time to go over all of this, but I'll do some of it. We'll start with number 3 at the top. This was a wall made of stone boxes wrapped in cedar bark, stacked up like a wall, and smeared over with mud, so it looked like a natural cave wall. Some of those even have metal records inside. Number 4 is a secret entrance that John made after he blew up the original entrance so no one could find it. So his personal access, wherever it was very skillfully hidden. He said you could get within 3 feet of it and not even know it was there. At number 5, you can see stairs leading down, and there's a bottomless pit at the bottom. If you weren't familiar with the cave layout, you might just go right down the stairs and walk up. But number 7 is safe access around that. So if you were familiar with these caves that protected records and burials, you could get around that. And then down at the bottom, number 12, very amazing discovery. 2 stone sarcophagi with giant mummified bodies in it, 1 male and 1 female. He was unable to take photos of these bodies, so these sketches were drawn. Fascinating, aren't they? There's so much to look at all at once. We will come back to these in a few minutes, but first I want to take a closer look at the plates. So he took out of the cave about 60 plates inscribed in unknown language. They were of various sizes, shapes, and metallurgical compositions. Apparently, he discovered approximately 7 gold plates throughout all this time, and a couple of lead plates. These were so soft they would start to mold right to your hand just from your ball feet. There were plates of hardened copper, so hard that a file couldn't scratch them. Yet some of the copper plates were a strange composition, shattering like glass. It dropped into fibrous pieces. Those pieces were so sharp that they would actually cut your fingers if you tried to handle them too much. So, as all good stories go, Tom Sugar soon began to swirl. He'd shown some of these artifacts to school children, to friends, to neighbors. He had items stolen from his roadside museum that he set up to show people. He was threatened, he was criticized, he was accused of fraud, understandably embarrassed and hurt and betrayed, feeling betrayed. He decided he wasn't going to work with any for children. Turns out that some of the artifacts were analyzed by university archaeologists. They determined that the inscriptions were too sharp and clear, and therefore interpreted to be modern. Brewer actually was deceptive in a way. He admitted that he did forge some of these items. That was his way of showing people what he had without using the original. So it was also a good way to test the integrity of others. If he had a copy of a plate and let someone take it and they never brought it back, he knew they couldn't be trusted and he wasn't really out anything. So this one here was purported to be a gold plate. I don't know who said it was, whether it's him or not. But it was purported to be a gold plate, but it turned out to be just copper, brass actually, like a cartridge bullet. Oh, I didn't tell you, this next one, I don't know if it is a fake or not. I'll let you decide, okay? But, that circle part will be, if you know what I mean. I don't think that was the question. So this is the general area where Bruce should be hiding. Gold Eagle, George Keller, and John Brewer were not the only ones to roam those hills and explore caverns. The Cox family knew of a cave with very similar description as Brewer's cave. And in fact, George Keller had a conversation with Maud Cox and told her, well, you know for sure, because there is a mark at Brewer's cave. And so there is a specific mark at the Other tombs were discovered in the surrounding area. Pictured here is where the one on the top is south of Manti, and it's supposedly an empty tomb. The ones on the bottom are on the west side. These structures are also purported to be empty tombs. I actually have not been to them yet, so if anyone knows where they are, show me the spot, and I'd like to see them. And in 1974, a bishop was called to meet at the Manti Temple one evening. Several men were taken to a corner of the temple lot where a chain link fence was being installed. One of the workers had tried to put in a fence post where a hole in the ground had broken away. He noticed unnaturally shaped and stacked stones nearby, and upon investigating, discovered an entrance to steps leading down into a cavern. The chamber contained the remains of a giant man and woman, artifacts, and many records. The men spent the night removing the contents of the cavern, which were later taken to Salt Lake. A capstone was placed over the entrance to the tomb. Now, we went out to the area, and if we had the right spot, this is what it looks like. We did find the shaped and stacked stones and scattered debris all along the fence line where we were told it would be. I had a chance to speak with the groundskeeper of the temple and asked him about all this, and he confirmed that those shaped, stacked stones here had been there since the temple was built. He had been handed all the history, and he knew all the history, and that's what he said. He also verified that there was something very sacred that was found and sent to Salt Lake, and he would not comment anymore. So, here's a story. In 1998, Jason Stevens was working on Chicken Creek near Whale when a man came into camp claiming that someone he knew had found 2 mummified giant bodies up there, all decked out. This man had been up all night looking for the tomb. Jason thought it was a lie, and he said so. But the next week, the man was up there again, and this time he saw the sword he had seen, and he showed Jason a huge breastplate from the tomb that Jason thought must have weighed 65 to 70 pounds. Obviously, the giant mummified bodies that John Brewer discovered were also all decked out, with shields, swords, breastplates, and headdresses, or crowns. We can only imagine what he would have felt like when he said that very little dust was inside. There were 3 blankets coated with pine resin lying on top of each body. He gently pulled down the straw-like cloth to take a look. The male was approximately 9 feet, 2 inches tall, had red hair, and was 3 to 4 feet across the shoulders. You guys, I don't know if you measure your shoulders, but 3 to 4 feet is pretty darn big. The female was approximately 8 feet, 10 inches tall, had blonde hair still intact. The skin was soft and moist like tan leather, and they seemed to be about 40 or 50 years old at the time of death. Each had on an elaborate headpiece, golden crown, and breastplate. The only thing that crumbled, he said, was the feathers. And also notice those flagstones across there, lying across the bodies, and notice the weapons. 2 years into this adventure, John Brewer wrote, I seem to feel sometimes that I'm being watched, but when I check and see, I see no one. The feeling will not leave. Even when I'm in a cave, I get it real strong when I go outside and leaves. And sometime later, he went up to the cave to think and ponder and just be there, but he felt the presence of another person in the room that was holding a light. At first, he thought he'd been followed, but immediately realized he hadn't. He was seized upon by a force of power that threw his body down to the ground. And this person introduced himself as Ether, an ancient spirit. Ether told him he was not to seek financial gain from the things in the chamber, but was given the charge to protect the discovery. Well, John felt that he was unworthy to be a custodian because he wasn't really active in the church. He drank a little, he smoked a little, and things like that. So Ether told him, though, he said that he had other attributes, and he must be very careful to protect the contents of the kingdom. Well, we do know that John Brewer was a humble man. He didn't even consider himself very smart. although others described him as very intelligent and as honest as the day is long. He worked patiently and he studied hard and had faith in the Lord. He confided that he didn't feel good about the gold he found, and he wrote, "Some of this stuff is worth a lot of money, and I could be real rich. Is this what I want? I will ask the Lord." He definitely had good attributes. So while he was digging, he uncovered the remains of other cultures that he believed had lived decayed over a span of several thousand years. Sincerely wanting to understand what he was finding, he was very prayerful. Being inactive in the church, he humbly studied what Joseph Smith taught about how to receive answers to prayer, and even wrote to church authorities for help. Meanwhile, he attended church and read the Book of Mormon several times. It was through all this he came to the conclusion that the original occupants of the cave must have been the Jaredites of the Book of Mormon. Now, Brigham Young, who brought the first pioneers to Utah, mentioned that there were Jaredite treasures in the hills and mountains around the Sanpete Valley, and that some of the Gadianton robbers were in Sanpete looking for the treasures of those who came from the tower. I will tie this all together. You'll see me going off on little tangents throughout, but I promise I'll bring them back together. There is a reason that I'm telling you this about. We want to understand who the Lord is. The Cherokee people claim that their sacred history was written on gold plates and buried in a hill somewhere in New York. In the early 1800s, Joseph Smith translated this native record, now called the Book of Mormon. It tells of distinct groups of people who sailed here from the Middle East thousands of years ago. Among them were the Jaredites. And John Brewer believed that the people of the cave he found were those Jaredites. So here's a little bit more about them. If you already know this, it's good review. If you don't, listen up. From the Book of Ether and the Book of Mormon, we learn that the Jaredites were descendants of Jared, his brother Muhammad, and their friends. They came from Mesopotamia, which is modern-day Iraq, when the Lord confounded the languages at the Tower of Babel, biblical source, you know that. They were led across the ocean in unique barges that were lit by glowing stones, and they established the greatest civilization here in the Americas. They were large and mighty and spread clear across the land. They thrived here for 1,600 years, then destroyed themselves in a civil war. So they lived from 2000 BC to 600 BC. This is a period during the Bronze Age. Ancestors of the Native American tribes encountered the giant people, and they've known the legends for centuries. The tribes each had their own name and description of these giant people. The Sitka were described as giant red-haired cannibals who plagued the ancestors of the Paiutes until the Paiutes annihilated them. You've probably heard the story of Lovelock Cave. Remains of those giants were actually found in and near Lovelock Cave in Nevada. The cave, under 4 feet of back-guano, was a pair of 16-inch sandals, along with the skeletal remains of giants and a handprint twice the size of that. The artifacts in there were dated to 2000. There's the Nahulo. They were known by the Comanches as rich and powerful race of cannibals, white giants 10 feet tall who built mound cities in Tennessee. They were wiped out by the Great Spirit for their pride and lack of mercy. There were the Starnake. The Navajo described them as a lethal race of white giants, marine men who dominated the West with mining technology. So they're the sailors. The Allegheny. The Dene speak of this very tall, peace-loving people related to the cannibal warriors. They secluded themselves on California's Channel Islands, such as Catalina Island, to escape the wrath of the evil ones. And then there was this isn't all of it, and there was the Alligator, a giant race of mound builders encountered by the Lenape. They built forts and entrenchments east of the Mississippi. So, the term mound builders refers to a group of pre-Columbian cultures known for their great earthworks. Here are some examples in the eastern U.S., but you need to know that the mounds exist here in the southwest as well. And look up here at the timeline. You can see that the Athena Mound Rovers and the Jaredites are the same people. Needless to say, we've got a whole lot of different names for the same group of people, don't we? So let's summarize this. As far back as 2000 BC, a regal race of rich and powerful white giants 10 feet tall were living their lives, building mound cities and earthworks, and seriously dominating the West with elite mining technology. Some were peace lovers, others were prideful, merciless cannibals. Spanish explorers also met up with live giants. When Coronado marched his expedition across the American Southwest, searching for the legendary 7 cities of Cibola, several tribes were mentioned as notably large. The Siri, who stood over 8 feet tall, the Cocopa, the Human, and others. When Alarcon brought his troops into the lower reaches of the Grand Canyon, he came upon a settlement of an estimated 200 giant warriors. 1,000 more were reported farther upstream. Maldonado brought back with him an Indian so large and tall that the best man in the army reached only to his chest. Castaneda reports, when they carry anything, they can take the load of more than 300 or 400 weight on their heads. Once, when our men wished to fetch a log for the fire and 6 men were unable to carry it, one of these giants is reported to have come and raised it in his arms, put it on his head alone, and carried it very easily. They were large and well-formed, without being corpulent. Some have their noses pierced, and from them hang pendants, while others wear shells. All of them wear a multicolored sash about their waist and tied in the middle, a round bundle of feathers hanging down like a tail. Their bodies are branded by fire, their hair is banged in front, but in the back it hangs to their waist. Now, in Arkansas, about the same time, a Shawnee chief named Chickasaw was described as a man of gigantic stature and Herculean strength. He had traded with the settlers regularly, bringing into town 20 gallons of pure honey in deerskin bags slung on his back. So we're talking 240 pounds here. He was one of the last of his race. The hunters who lived, died, and were buried at the foot of the mountain that bears his name. Years later, a number of 9-foot-tall skeletons were exhumed from Chickasaw. Now, when you see a modern-sized man next to a man 9 feet tall, they really are gigantic. On the left is Harold Warlock, 5 feet 11 inches, next to his son, Robert, who is 8 feet 11 inches. Robert had a disorder called gigantism and died in the 1940s. On the right, though, is a mummified body 9 feet tall from California, discovered in 1895. The Brooklyn Cave mummies were the same size. Comparing skeletons, or giant skeletons, in the Bible, let's start with our typical modern 6 foot tall. The next one is 9 feet tall. That's the size of the Anakites that are mentioned in the book of Deuteronomy. The next one is Goliath, killed by David, the shepherd boy. Goliath was approximately 10 feet tall. And then Og of Bashan was 12 feet tall. The Bible says his bed was 13.5 feet long, 6 feet wide, and was made of solid iron. Og was one of the Rephaim defeated by Moses. There were giants in those days. Some giants had enormous jaws and double rows of teeth. Over on the right there, you can see a mandible of a giant compared with a modern mandible. They say that his skulls, you could pick up those skulls and easily fit them over your head. Some giants had 6 fingers and 6 toes. There are a few hands and feet with 6 feet depicted on Native American rock art in Utah and New Mexico. You know, we're surrounded by rock art, or rock writings, as I like to call it. But if you ask the Native Americans, sometimes they can tell you what it means. Sometimes they have just forgotten. But sometimes they will tell you, oh, those aren't ours. Those were put there by Mapping the giants. Literally thousands of 7 to 12 feet tall giant skeletons have been documented in North America. In Utah alone, we know the names of giants in Salt Lake, Provo, Payson, Manti, Canaan, Grand Gulch, and more. Between 1894 and 1920, Utah mummies made national news. It said, "Science is stumped by strange mummies in Utah. No possible explanation yet to account for the red-headed, wavy-haired, perhaps white race in America, thousands of years before the Indians or the Cliff Dwellers. There are legends of a fair people dwelling in the New World long before Columbus discovered it. In light of recent discoveries, science is turning away from the scornful disregard of these stories. The mummies which have proven the existence of these red-haired whites in America were found in caves under the houses of the Cliff Dwellers in Grand Gulch, Utah. Supposedly at that time, they said that that was the most torturous canyon in the Southwest. Among the collection was a male of giant stature, so well preserved, the mustache was still on his face. He was actually taken to the Chicago World's Fair and put on display. I'll tell you more about that in a second. But the bodies were placed in the floor of the cave inside potholes on display. They were covered with a very curious matting or blanket of feathers, a layer of woven straw and colored symbols. When packed around with cedar bark. Their basket type was that of the most ancient tribes of Egypt. It is the oldest type in the world. So bodies of these people went to Chicago, Pennsylvania, Denver, Harvard, Yale. Where they ended up, we're not quite sure. But I did find out that collections from Grand Gulch have almost these bodies probably not. But they are now housed in 3 places: New York, Chicago, and Salt Lake City. In the 1980s, the judge discovered giant skeletons in Johnson Canyon near Canal. You might have heard Jen Dillman talk about this yesterday. The skeletons were placed in a sitting position in sandstone holes smoothed aside with cement-like clay, then covered with thick round roots of sandstone and more cement. Even the cliff face was camouflaged with a layer of it. I have to tell you, when we went up there, I was climbing all over there and didn't even notice that it was this clay stuff until I was climbing down and noticed, wait a minute, there's something a little bit off. Otherwise, it was just like a normal sandstone. Some of the potholes were still sealed. They were marked by a slight round indentation and 8 finger marks on it. You can see that circle over there. This skeleton was the first one found here. They called him Smiley. Can you guess why? The bodies were 7 to 12 feet tall and skulls were dated to 2000 BC. There were no artifacts inside these burials, only the skeletons and sand. The 3 universities that tested these skulls really wanted to continue the study, but the mother of the judge was having increasingly ominous nightmares. She was having these very angry people of the past coming to her in her dreams and insisting that she stop the day, put all the bodies back, and leave them alone. Kind people also from the past came to her and agreed, giving her the warning that the bodies needed to be returned, they needed to be stopped because the place was cursed. So it was for them only. So she did. She stopped the day. Artifacts were found in a nearby cedar field. A little metal ball that had been packed with straw inside a clay vessel, a well-made fishing net, a bundle of goat hair tied with an ancient fisherman's knot, and a woven textile made of camel hair that dates to 1200 BC. Now, just a fun fact on the side. A friend told me that camels actually originated in North America, but they were thought to have died out in the Pleistocene era. Until the discovery of a camel skull in the lava tubes in Fillmore. They worked on that and they had to push the extinction date much later than they originally thought because of that skull. Still puts it in like 25,000 years ago. So it just is a little interesting that we find this. Maybe it was brought in from another place, but 1500 BC camel hair. Now, high above the canal grave at the top edge of the cliff is a huge sacrificial altar, 8 feet long. That's my friend Elizabeth up there. The symbol on it resembles the Greek letter phi. You can see that. Many people call it the water bird. Probably heard of that. There are several of these in Utah, but this is likely the largest of all. They have been dated to 2000 BC. The ancients did perform animal sacrifices. Cuneiform tablet receipts for sacrificial animals from the Tower of David, where the Jaredites originated from, have been found here in America, and I'll show those to you in just a few minutes. But the symbol on this altar is about 7 feet long, deeply carved. When it rains, the water collects in it, runs down the channel, off the end of the rock, over the cliff, towards those burials below. And here's a fun one. I don't live too far from Goshen. In 1897, in Goshen Canyon, Utah, a family mining saltpeter explored a nearby cave. Inside was a chamber with a passageway, which they followed for about 40 feet. But the dust was so thick and soft that they were keeping it up with their feet and they couldn't breathe. So they went back to the chamber and discovered the chamber was about 10 by 12 feet. And it had a pot full of bones, a well-preserved arrow, and embedded right in the wall in the saltpeter was the giant arm bone, or should I say, the lower arm bone of the gigantic man, right there. Outside of this cave is a pictograph of a woman. Now, I've never seen a pictograph of a woman specifically in Goshen Canyon, but I did find those. April 15th, 2015, the Ute Tribal Council met with Wayne May to discuss an ancient tomb located deep within the Ute Reservation in the Ute Mountains. The tomb contained 2 giant skeletons, 11 feet tall, with red hair and decorated in full armor. The sarcophagus had a stone lid that would swing out with one hand, like a door. There was a polished granite stone, 8 feet square, with an inscription on it and many blackened plates of silver. This must have been one of the sites on John River's cave. The Indian that was telling this story had been in this tomb himself, and he said that they originally had caught John River coming out of that. Forcefully told him never, ever. In Payson, Utah, inside a mound, a home was discovered containing 2 large skeletons, male and female. The male had a sandstone pipe in his teeth and an iron sword at his side. In another room were skeletons and bones of all kinds of animals, including horses. Viable wheat kernels were found inside a stone box encased in cement. There was also clay molds for testing iron implements. Now there's a really interesting story about the ancient mound wheat that they found here. That'll be for another day. But I will just say it was planted, it grew, and it became very, very popular in 5 Utah counties. In 1879, back east, A.J. Cohen of the St. Louis Academy of Science wrote about this mound, the home inside, and the precious wheat. He said, "There once existed here a more enlightened race of human beings. The authors of these works were undoubtedly the mound-building people of the Mississippi Valley." In 1891, the gigantic skeleton of a man measuring 8 feet 6 inches was found near the Jordan River just outside Salt Lake City by a workman who was digging an irrigation ditch. The skeleton was standing upright. The skull measured 11 inches in diameter and 19 inches long. A copper chain, to which was attached 3 medallions covered with curious hieroglyphics, was found around the neck of the skeleton, and near it were found several copper medals. Archaeologists believe that the original owner of the skeleton belongs to the race of the mound builders. Notice on the bird cave giant, the circle on his chest. The one at the bottom is another one that was in the cave, and so are these. Sorry, some of these are kind of blurry. This one's a drawing, so that you can see a little bit more of the details. But then I found in Ancient American Magazine this photo. Look at what's lying on that chest of that skeleton. The article attached with that was the New York Times, 1916. In a mound were found the bones of 68 men. The average height was 7 feet, while many were much taller. Further evidence of their gigantic size was found in large axes, hewn from stone and buried in the grave. And I want to throw this fact in Wisconsin. They found a stone axe that was 20 inches by 14 inches by 11 inches, 300 pounds. But back to this. With 68 giants in one mound, I think we can safely rule out that these giants are random victims of gigantism. Some people claim that that's all. But check out these numbers. 1872, British Columbia, 200 giant skeletons were discovered, all slain in battle. In 1897, a prehistoric battlefield was discovered in Kansas. 100,000 giant warriors killed in battle over 2,000 years ago. Professor Walters declared the battle was fought between the mound builders and the attacking Maya Toltec race, striving to wrest the Mississippi Valley from the mound builders. Burials of these giants all over the U.S. are very similar to what we see. In fact, Belt Mountains, Montana, a gold hunter while prospecting the Belt Mountains discovered a mysterious cavern. At the foot of the stairs was the skeleton of a man 9 feet 6 inches. Beside him was a copper axe and club. Underneath was a gold plate 10 inches long, 6 inches wide, covered with a strange writing. The Moundsville giants. Giant skeletons were found surrounded by ornaments of various kinds. There was a stone tablet inscribed with ancient hieroglyphs. Another was wearing pieces of mica on the shoulders, which appeared to be epaulets. Again, similarities. Gartersville, Mississippi, 1884, this discovery was of a giant wearing a copper crown. The bodies were encased in a network made of straw. The tomb was covered with large flagstones engraved with inscriptions. And this one, while searching a cave near the Great Cobra, or Copper Canyon in northern Mexico, explorer Paxton Hayes came across 34 mummified men and women. All had long hair. All rose to heights between 7 and 8 feet. In the 1920s, Professor Ralph Glidden and his team exhumed nearly 4,000 skeletons of a blonde-haired, blue-eyed race of giants. One king was 9 feet 2 inches, but the average was about 7 feet. He found that this highly intelligent, fair-skinned race thrived in the West 3,000 years ago. Among the items found there were a thin piece of slate, a map rock, showing trails to the 4 main burial grounds, while another included trinkets and small stone rings. Okay, so we've heard of the map rock, right? But what are the small stone rings? See where the arrow is pointing? An authentication report was found on map of the stone ring from the cave in Manti. The evidence strongly suggests a manufacturing date older than 1200 BC. It too would be over 3,000 years old. This is Ralph Glidden's Museum of Giant Remains, discovered on Catalina and the other Channel Islands. Those islands are known as the site of the earliest evidence of seafaring in America. These photos here show Ralph Glidden with a 9-foot skeleton and over 100 skulls. The archaeological method used back then is very unethical, doesn't it? Death Valley giants. Inside a complex of caves, Dr. Bruce Russell found giants 8 and 9 feet tall. Hieroglyphics, carefully chiseled and polished granite. You know, if we can only make those, we learn so much more. Extensive weapons and religious artifacts. He found well-preserved remains of dinosaurs, saber-toothed tigers, imperial elephants, and other extinct beasts. Dr. Russell was there, following up on reports that the Smithsonian had hidden evidence of giants found in the valley. So this was back in 1947. Even then, they were dealing with the Great Smithsonian Cobra. A lot of people ask why was this knowledge of giants suppressed? Why did the Smithsonian cover things up? Why isn't this in our history books? Well, it is kind of a long issue, but the quick answer is manifest. An attitude of prejudice spread among the academics of the Smithsonian. Natives were regarded as nothing more than making away from American expansion. Great effort was made to dispel the myth that a civilized race had existed here, resulting in the tragic loss of some of America's most important history. John Wesley Powell, E.G. Squire, and Lord Henry Morgan were highly influential men of the day. Each played a vital role in shaping the Smithsonian Institution. These men began what non-Mormons called the wanton destruction of the ancient history of the Mound Road civilization. Now, pictured right here is the Hanukkah earthworks. This was completely, intentionally destroyed, obliterated. They sent an Army Corps engineer out to level it. Could it be because it had the shape of a menorah and an oil lamp? John Wesley Powell went as far as to mandate limitations on how archaeological data could be used, saying, discoveries have often been wrongfully used to connect North American tribes with races of antiquity in other parts of the world, and it is illegitimate to use any pictographic matter of a date anterior to the discovery of the continent by Columbus for historic purposes. So can you see what he was doing? Mm-hmm. Completely discrediting all pictographic records on tablets, stone, skin, bark, wood, metal, etc., even earthworks. The Smithsonian Institute had intentionally suppressed information regarding both American history and the giants. Within their own records, there are no less than 17 cases of the Smithsonian themselves uncovering giant skeletons. They put it in their own annual report. They were given many more, yet all of them have disappeared. In 2014, workers barely knew nothing of giant skeletons even in the records. Okay, this next part is really sad and hard to talk about, but I'll be much a little bit off the slide out of respect. In the mid-1800s, the Army Medical Museum collected native skulls from battlefields, tribal cemeteries, and ancient mounds for comparative studies in racial differences. After the study ended, over 2,000 skulls were turned over to the Smithsonian Institution. That's when Lewis Henry Morgan announced that America's early inhabitants had the skulls and brains of barbarians. A century later, attempting to right the wrong, more than 6,000 individual human remains were offered for repatriation by the Smithsonian. The reason? In 1990, NAGPRA, the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. They had to give back these type of things and let them be taken care of by the people. So I believe that's why, or part of the reason why at least, that a lot of the giant skeletons and knowledge became lost for quite some time. However, in 1848, Abraham Lincoln was en route from Boston to Chicago. He made these very interesting remarks. In the early ages of the world, while the race of giants were yet in the pride of their existence, the eyes of that species of extinct giant whose bones fill the mounds of America have gazed on Niagara as ours do now. He was referencing the mound builders to emphasize the long history of this continent and the vastness of time. Now, to lighten things just a little bit, you may not have the same funny bone as I do, but when you do a Google search on giants, okay, it is very obvious that AI is very biased against the existence of the giant. Okay? So when this quote comes up, AI likes to comment. He was not literally referring to giants, but rather using a poetic and historical reference to the concept. Right. So, regardless, it was much common knowledge. Okay, so we're going to switch gears a little bit And we're going to take a look at the ancient records, starting with some of the beautifully decorated boxes of the Great Series. This one has a ship on the side and man wings in the center of the lid. Do more research on. You'll see various styles and varying numbers of compartments in these boxes. Some use little wooden pegs inserted in holes to hold the lid on. Some have little trunk trees that you could open them with. This one has a horse and chariot on the lid and two compartments inside. That horse and chariot holds some very important clues. We'll get to that in a few minutes. This stone box was wrapped in juniper bark and pitch and was given to Dr. Paul Chessman, still sealed. When it was opened, it had one compartment with inscribed metal plates inside. Ancient writing on metal plates in the stone box in North America. That's pretty amazing. These are various photos of those 6 plates from the box. Finally, in 2005, the Ancient Historical Research Foundation provided a sample of the juniper bark covering the box to be tested. The test was run 10 times for accuracy. 10 times, they obtained the following results. Dr. Stephen Jones, the physics professor at UIU, reports, with a radiocarbon age of 390 BC to 5 BC, the bluer bark sample is thus scientifically demonstrated to be very old. The bluer findings have forced archaeologists to rewrite currently accepted history of the area. The bark used to cover the stone box in question is indeed ancient. My dear friend Larry Liston owns this bark, and I neglected to call him and ask him to bring it today. He's here, but he didn't bring the bark. So scholars have claimed for many years that ancients in North America did not write on metal plates. I believe they did. The Book of Mormon is a good example. Here's a list of several more, and we'll look at each one of those. Maryland, the current guardian of the ancient Navajo records, told how her great-great-grandmother had been on the Long Walk of 1864, when the Navajo were forced to walk 300 miles through the reservation. To survive, she had to trade some of the metal records of her people to the soldiers. Maryland's grandmother was the medicine woman who left the remaining records buried in a box up in the mountains for Maryland to watch over. Chief Copwhite and Ojibwe tell us that most Indian nations of the West have places in which they deposit their records. Ojibwe have 3 depositories near Lake Superior. The records are said to be a transcript of what the Great Spirit gave to the Indians after the flood. They are written on slate rock, copper, lead, and birch bark, then wrapped in swan or pieced down, and placed in a hollow cedar box smeared with gum. 10 guardians check on the records every 15 years. If the records have begun to decay, they are taken out and an exact facsimile is made and put in their stead. So, if records are looked at and found that the inscription looks too old, sharp, and clear, must be modern, it actually is still possible that ancient history is written. Okay? The Taliba tribe descended from the mound builders and lived in the southwestern plains. Sometime before 1483, they were reduced to a very small remnant, suffering much hardship. 25 emaciated survivors traveled east on foot to live with their cherished relatives. The journey took over a year. They brought with them thin gold plates of their written language. Sequoia, the famous Cherokee, was a descendant of the Taliba people and the last tribe of the 7 Clan Society. The original Cherokee syllabary actually came from the writing on the gold plate and was in use by the Cherokee since at least 1483. The current Cherokee syllabary wasn't created until 1827 by Elias BurnEye, not Sequoia. One of the many pieces of history that we have misunderstood. And this comes from the book by Traveler Bird, Tell Them They Lie. The ancient Taliba writing system was also known by the Teslatech Creeks of the Smoky Mountains. The modern Creek syllabary appears to be a simplified version of the older characters on this Creek document in the middle, and next to it is the Aroke plate. I felt like there were a lot of similarities there. We had to read the Aroke plate, but I put it there just for your information. So, let's get on. No. Yeah, I did actually. The older script has been identified as Cartesian. That's an Indo-European Celtic language developed by a mound-building people during the Bronze Age. And they were in Iberia, which is next to Spain. The Cartesians vanished from there, totally lost to history. But then their language pops up here. So it kind of makes you wonder how scholars can still reject transoceanic travel from the old world to the new before forming it. It's really unbelievable. The Creek and Shawnee were known to have 2 brazen tablets and 5 copper, given to them by the Great Spirit and handed down from time immemorial. The crudely cut tablets were circular, oval, square, even spatula-shaped. Some resembled breastplates or shields of ancient soldiers with writing on them, which appeared to be Hebrew. They once had many more inscribed plates, but they carried them up in the graves of notable men. And now the Michigan tablets, while these don't directly relate to the giants, they're another very interesting example of records on metal plates. So I put them in here real quick. Over 3,000 artifacts of clay, slate, and copper were discovered in Hopewell Mound, Internet, Michigan, over 100 years. Each one engraved with the mystic symbol, the name of God, in cuneiform Hebrew, Yod, He, Vav, Jehovah. These tablets were inscribed with several different scripts. Most have not been translated, but at least one, Egyptian tablet, turned out to be scripture from the Hebrew Bible. Many of the Michigan tablet inscriptions depicted biblical themes from the Old and New Testaments. Henriette Mertz, patent attorney, research, and cryptographer, declared they were authentic and made by Coptic Christians in approximately 350 AD. These sadly evolved in Michigan. Before they were sent back, though, a few of us got to see this collection. They are absolutely amazing, and some of these tablets are called diamonds. So apparently, this group of Egyptian-based Christian mound builders with the Hebrew name of God on everything. Their household items, their records, crowns, all of it. Kinderhook. In 1843, 6 brass plates were discovered in a large mound overlooking the Mississippi River near Kinderhook, Illinois. The plates were actually lying on the chest of a 9-foot skeleton, approximately 12 feet below the surface of the mound, among broken pottery, charcoal, and ashes. The little bundle of bell-shaped plates each had a hole near the small end and a ring through the middle. Joseph Smith said, I translated a portion of them and find they contain the history of the person with whom they were found. He was a descendant of Ham through the loins of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he received his kingdom from the ruler of heaven and earth. They contain the genealogy of one of the ancient Jaredites back to Ham, the son of Noah. The Kinderhook plates would make a book of about 1,200 pages. So we're saying that would be 100 pages of history on one side of one of those little things. That shows you the value of pictographic writing. Each character could represent a word, a concept, or an entire idea. So isn't it interesting that that is what the Smithsonian targeted? They supported that as non-history if it predates Columbus. Unbelievable. This is a map of giant burials with writing or hieroglyphics included in the burial. These were inscriptions on stone, metal, on a variety of objects. Unfortunately, nearly all of these artifacts with the writing on it have been lost, but we still have information about some of them. This one is called the Brush Creek Tablet. It was discovered in 1882 in a grave of giant men and women, buried in couples, their skeletons over 9 feet tall. The inscription is composed of 3 different forms: Demotic, hieroglyphic, and Greek, and dates to at least 525 BC. That actually was translated in a beautiful scripture. Doesn't follow our known scriptures, but then we have the chunky stone depth. Chucky's stone disc is a game piece. Chucky's played by tossing this disc out and then trying to spear it. They throw their spears at it, whoever got close. This one is from a mound in Georgia, the homeland of the Creek Indians. The writing on it compares to both the Brush Creek tablet I just showed you and items from Brewer's Cave in Nantucket. Okay. So let's compare. At the top left is the stone disc from Georgia, and below that, the Brush Creek tablet from the Giant Bear. Everything else came from the tomb in Nantucket. So it appears to be the same writing system. If you look at all those different things, they really are similar. How did we figure it out? I don't know. So I was following some online conversation by linguists that were talking about this topic and picked up some really interesting comments. My first impression, says Lonnie, was a similarity to the Indus Valley script. Now, Indus Valley is up there, it's the blue area on the map. The round stone appears to contain archaic cuneiform pictograph symbols. Cuneiform is the oldest known writing system, and it originated in the green area on that map, Mesopotamia. Zooming in on the map of Mesopotamia, this is where the Hittites came from. Throughout the next two slides, we're going to see ties to several of these areas that are on the map. Okay? The Mediterranean, Assyria, Sumer, the Indus Valley. These places were all connected by trade at the time of the Hittites. So, they would have something definitely to do with those giants. So pay attention, because this part's kind of a lot to grasp. So I'll tell you. According to Richard Thornton, a Creek Indian, president of the Appalachian Foundation and the leading expert on Southeastern Indians, he said, petroglyphs of Tuggeroo, Georgia, have the same writing system as that chunky stone disc in the Brush Creek tablet. The glyphs show images of Bronze Age Scandinavian ships. He says petroglyphs in Georgia correspond with Bronze Age Scandinavians who had a previous connection to the Indus Valley. He continues, Parowan Gap in Utah contains many petroglyphs not seen elsewhere in the Southwest, but they're very common in North Georgia. In fact, Appalachia means the same thing in Crete that Parowan does in the Yukon, offspring from the sea. He says, obviously, Utah had visitors from Georgia, but how does he know that Georgia didn't have visitors from Utah? Here we can compare ships from Utah, Georgia, and in fact, all depicting the same type of boat. It's called the Bronze Age Scandinavian Yachtsman. How's that? You won't see that in Parowan Gap if you go there now. It's in the little cave. The bars on, you can't get in. We were very fortunate to take that before they put those bars on, and looking in as well as we can, it doesn't look like a rock. You sit there with that on. So, the drawings of the people in Brewer's Cave do seem to have a Nordic quality about them. If you notice, there's a vague similarity between the male mummy in Nantucket and King Harold Bluetooth. The flagstone inscription is reminiscent of a rune tablet, and the heads on there may look like dragons. There's one big difference. The Brewer Cave people appear to be a much older culture than the Vikings. A confederation of pirates known collectively as the Sea People were the Bronze Age precursors to the Vikings of Scandinavia. Even the great gods of the Viking age, Odin, Freyr, and Thor, had their closely related predecessors in the Scandinavian Bronze Age. Also, the genetics lab at the University of Copenhagen has traced the blue lights and red blonde of Scandinavians to a people who once lived in the southeastern tip of Ireland and were associated with the Indus Valley civilization. This explains how Scandinavians are descended from the giant people with blue eyes, red and blonde hair, and a writing system that connects to the Indus Valley during the Bronze Age. Pretty cool. Now remember that I mentioned this one helps improve. A sun cross or wheel cross is frequently A sun cross, a real cross, is frequent. We needed a little break, didn't we? Right? Try this again. Yes, a sun cross, a real cross, is frequently found in the symbolism of prehistoric cultures, particularly during the Bronze Age period. The domesticated horse was introduced, and together with the sun and the chariot, became a central element in the religion of the Bronze Age. The sun chariot is a symbol of the sun's journey across the sky and the cyclical nature of time. Also, the myths and legends of the Norse people are filled with captivating tales of gods, giants, and fantastical creatures. These stories include the sun goddess Sol and her chariot. Here you can see the horse, chariot, and wheel cross from Earth. Now, a short excerpt. Thomas Mitchell shared with me that he was convinced that the Rural Cave was real when he saw the drawing. Most people would draw a sword. If they were just doodling, they would draw a sword, much more typical looking, with some kind of crossguard. But this is a Bronze Age sword, easily identified by the way the handle meets the blade, the riveted, and the absence of crossguard. Pretty cool. Scorpion images are found in both the Indus Valley and Mesopotamia, which is our modern day. In fact, the scorpion was the well-known emblem of the Assyrian queen in 2000 BC. On the bottom left and center are scorpions from the Antiquities. The one on the right comes from the Indus Valley. Similarity speaks for itself. On this one, the Assyrian woman's headpiece is very similar to the image on the stone box from Antioch. Notice the flower stems and the base, the shape of the thing they go into on the back of her head is identical. But I think an archaeologist knows to put this on the site. But if you look at her and imagine her profile, it's actually just like one plate as well. Now, speaking of Assyria, I'm going to tell you another story. I don't think it doesn't match, but it does. I want to tell you a story of Chief Joseph. Chief Joseph of Bananas was a great chief. Unfortunately, like most Indian stories, his is a sad one. In 1877, the government drove Bananas from the beautiful homeland in the Walla Valley in Oregon. Chief Joseph led his people on an epic journey of 1,600 miles up the Rocky Mountains, desperately trying to get his people to Canada, where they could truly live in peace. Chased by the cavalry for over 3 months, he brilliantly outmaneuvered and evaded them despite numerous battles. Sadly, just 40 miles from the border and their freedom, they were caught. Cavalry had killed over 200 of his people. The rest were exhausted and starving. After another battle, during a freezing snowstorm, Chief Joseph had no choice but to surrender. His famous words that you always hear are, "My heart is sick and sad. From where the sun now sets, I will fight no more forever." When Chief Joseph was captured, he had a small clay tablet with cuneiform writing on it inside his medicine bag. The tablet had been in his family for generations, he said, inherited from his white ancestors. It turns out it is an Assyrian sales receipt for a sacrificial lamb dating to 2042 BC. The bag itself is decorated with the Assyrian Star of Asher. His cuneiform tablet is now on display at West Point, the United States Military Academy, in his honor. Another small tablet with cuneiform writing was discovered in Herndon, Georgia in 1963. This one was made of lead. It was a Sumerian sales receipt for sheep and goats to be used as a sacrifice to the sun god in 2040 BC. Still another Sumerian tablet was found in Quaker City, Ohio in 1978 and dates to about 2000 BC. Go figure, here we have 3 tablets in America from the exact time and place that the Jaredite originated from. I have some photos of yet one more of these that hasn't been dated or translated or verified yet. It was found in the Vatican. Scholars say we have unreserved verification by mainstream archaeologists who freely admit that all three tablets are authentic. Judging from the artifacts they left behind, the Assyrians and Sumerians made quite an extensive voyage to the Americas about 4,000 years ago, just like our day. Okay, now we're going to look at Michigan copper. The scientific community wonders where all the copper came from that fueled the Bronze Age. You know, we're talking about the Bronze Age. Old world sites did not produce the amount of copper that was consumed at the time, so where were all the copper mines? Pictured here is the world's largest copper nugget weighing in at 28.2 tons from Michigan. All the copper artifacts found in America could not equal even one of these large nuggets, and there are. The largest known quantities in the world of pure native copper were found on Michigan's Keweenaw Peninsula. That ancient stone map up there at the top left, it's a map of the Great Lakes copper mining district, and that was found in Burke Cave in Illinois. 500 million pounds of copper were mined from tens of thousands of pits by the ancient miners. Remember the Navajo, Caldwell, Stonehaven, the white giants endowed with mining technology. The Indian legends claim the mining was done by fair-haired marine men. In 1982, 10 tons of copper ingots were recovered from the Luberon, a late Bronze Age shipwreck off the coast of Turkey. The copper was 99.5% pure, unalloyed copper. The ingots were all brittle Worcester copper, poured outdoors over wood fires. Only Michigan copper is of its purity and is known to have been mined in enormous quantities during the Bronze Age using this method. Two characteristics, they say, stand out. They are extremely porous and brittle. Simply dropping the ingots onto a hard surface would easily shatter them. Do you remember what was said about the Burke Cave copper plates? Some of the copper plates were of strange composition, shattering like glass in private pieces if dropped. Perhaps it was Michigan copper. Michigan copper undoubtedly made an impact on the world trade, as well as here in America. Cultural history of this hemisphere was actually rewritten with a book called Bronze Age America by Barry Fell. The message was clear. Europeans, Africans, and Asians made routine yet historically unremembered visits to America for at least 3,000 years before Columbus celebrated landfall. No doubt, trading copper from the mine. Okay, we just have a few more slides and then I'll wrap this up. Obviously, we could learn a lot about these giant people if we could read the records that they left for us. A Canadian Indian who wishes to remain anonymous, guardian of his tribe's ancient records, saw the plates from Manti and claimed that he could read them as the knowledge had been passed down to him through the generations. Well, John Brewer decided to test him. He secretly took random plates from various boxes and put them together for him to read. If the Indian read easily from one to another, Brewer would know he was fine. The Indian looked through them, pondered, and commented, explained to us that they didn't go together. One was a history, another spoke of burial practices, another of metals and chemistry, and so on. John Brewer was so impressed that he gave the man a box. The Canadian Indian translated some of his plates. John must have taken notes and he answered a few of his own thoughts. He says, one of the copper plates has a date of 2500 BC and tells of a voyage across the ocean of the Tila people under a leader called Hiram, who was a leader under a leader, for it was his brother who talked with God. Looking up, I find that they are known by a lot of names, but it adds up to what we know as Jaredites. In the Book of Mormon, Jared was a leader under a leader for his brother who talked with God. And I think it's interesting that they call their leader Pyro. Pyro means fire or light. Interesting. It's also interesting that the Tila, well, some Pueblo people today call themselves Pyro or Tila and speak the language of Tila. Tila Sila, the mother tongue, is not an Indian language. It is an ancient tongue constructed according to vibratory levels of Mother Nature. According to the ancients, the Creator created different languages, each with specific resonating qualities. The native tribes of Hierarchy were both trace their ancestry back to the Jaredite era. That parallels the Bible. All men spoke the Adamic language, the mother tongue, until the Tower of Babel and the confusion of the languages. These giant Jaredites are the only people that we know of that kept the language. It was not confounded, and they came with that language. They fled the tower and came to this continent of America. More translation. The records from Brewer's Cave spoke of battle and the war that devastated the nation. The few survivors carried records with them which they secreted away in various places in the Southwest. These were written in order of importance on gold, copper, brass, stone, and clay. Some of the records chronicle the life history of the deceased. These were all left with the body. Notice how the likeness on this blade seems to refer to the woman. Has the same W to headband. You can see it there and hard to see. Some places told the history ranging from as far back as Adam up to the time of the man who was buried there. Notice the inscription on the flagstone, at least most of it, is also on. A messenger from the South Country has come. Enemies are looking for us. Records are to be gathered and packed. We shall take them with us. Some are to be buried with our whole leader's life, for they are his life and his deeds. That could very well be why John Brewer was never able to find the library over on West Point. They were packed up. So, John Brewer's claims are certainly plausible. Giants did roam this side of America. Tombs, skeletons, artifacts, and archaeological records verify all consternation. Metal records are not unknown in North America. Native histories, eyewitnesses, and tangible plates verify their existence. Unreadable script and modern-looking inscriptions do not diminish the possibility of authentic ancient history inscribed on metal plates. Items discovered by John Brewer have been scientifically proven to be at least 2,000 to 3,000 years old. Evidence testifies of correlations between ancient people of both Islam and Mesopotamia, the homeland of the giant Jaredites. John Brewer says, I don't expect anybody to believe me, and I'm not worried because I know what I've got. So I will leave you with that, and I want to thank you so much for coming. I hope that something I've shared will encourage you and inspire you to continue on in your journey. You can go on now. I don't have any experience with that.
Great presentation. You really added a lot. Added a lot. It's like really just it's added a lot. You got a lot. Yeah. There's a lot of stuff. Our mission.
Oh, and then I didn't have to deal with her.
Yeah, it's like I got rid of it.
It's happening. I actually, I saw those. You got so much. Yeah. Pretty sure. Is he on it? Yeah.
No, I think
I don't think that's all that. There's a lot of people. You probably got you feel a lot of people.
Sorry, but we have some Mexican place right on Main Street.
That's where we were going to
Are you sure? I don't think I'll get email.
Yeah.
You got their way. Just
translated that sort of. I've seen all the things.
Are you not?
So it is, I was thinking that's for Sunday, no, he said.
Are you?
Because I was asking my name about what it was, how I was trying to find this issue.
That's why I want to get her.
It's fun, yeah.
I don't know the stories. There's some stories.
I believe they made.
So my
Instead of going south, west.
Yeah. There's a reason to see it. I have to specific question. He might have talked about it, I don't know. He wasn't.
And
Curious.
All right, yeah, that's wrap. Much love, y'all. Editing man, Craig, I was just telling a story about you and that. Okay, love y'all, and I'll be back in a little bit with another interview. Thank you all for watching.
You crazy mother. Yeah.
It's just BurnEye. Hey, BurnEye just like last week, huh?
Weekend at Bernie's.